you know, I've been blessed all my life, and I was blessed to be, I would petition and be approved to continue my service on active duty in spite of my injuries.
I saw that. That was amazing. I read
yeah.
that.
Yeah, my first job, once I was approved to stay on active duty, was the director of the United States Army Wounded Warrior Program. And then the Army's greatest sense of humor, I was actually promoted from lieutenant colonel to colonel. And then in my last assignment, I was responsible for running a military base here at Fort Belvoir locally. And then after 2 years of that, I was ready to be done. So I retired in September 2014 with 26 plus years.
Now, I don't want you to talk about anything that makes you uncomfortable. And so feel free just to share what you want.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I'm an open book.
What do you remember about that day with your traumatic injury?
Right. Well, it's a significant day for me, obviously, but not just because of my injuries. You know, in the early months of 2007, Iraq was extremely violent. I mean, I can almost recall daily that at least one American service member would pay with their lives. I mean, I mean, imagine going to work every day knowing that that somebody's going home, and that's tough. And on May 7th, I was on the night of May 7th, I was returning from a memorial service for two young men, First Lieutenant Ryan Jones and Specialist Sunson, who were they were part of my brigade from Fort Riley, and they had been killed 3 or 4 days earlier. And I went to pay my respects at their memorial service. And so I was returning back to my headquarters after this memorial service. And I remember that evening, you know, I was, I mean, I was extremely, I guess, introspective about these young men's sacrifice, and really just kind of wondering, you know, is this ever going to end? Is this worth it? Are we over here? Is this worth it? And then kind of thinking about their families, like, you know, what are their families going through? You know, they just lost two young men, and you know, they hadn't even hit the prime of their life. And I'm like, you know, just trying to wrap my mind around this, Tina, and then wham, you know, I'm hit. So first of all, it's the second time that my vehicle's been hit by an IED since being in Iraq. So I know what it is. The blast blows me out of my vehicle, and so I'm flying through the air. And I remember hitting the ground, coming to a rolling stop on my back. And I was pissed. I was using every curse word in the book. You know, I just like really just like, how dare you? I'm here trying to make life better for you guys, and you're freaking trying to kill me. And then I immediately knew that I was in bad shape. Like I couldn't move, I couldn't get up, and I realized that I'm going to die. And I said, God, I don't want to die in this country. And that's when I lost consciousness.
Were you in a lot of pain, and were you with other people?
There were 5 of us counting me, there were 5 of us in the vehicle, but you know, I was blown out of my vehicle. My vehicle kind of kept going until it finally came to a stop. I was vehicle number 3 of 4 in a patrol, and so when my vehicle came to a stop, the vehicle behind me obviously saw what had happened to me, and First Sergeant Frederick Johnson was the first to arrive at my vehicle, and he was the one that recognized that I wasn't there, and he would be the one that would find me. I'm over 100 meters from where my vehicle stopped, lying in a pool of my blood. And then a young private in my patrol put the tourniquets on my legs, and he is the one that the doctors credit for saving my life. Now, look, I'll go into this, but just to kind of keep it moving. But I'll just say this. So I would go through 129 pints of blood that night. I died 6 times. I went into arrest 6 different times that evening, and really to give the audience a chance to understand how dangerous it was in Iraq. You know, in the month of May, 131 U.S. service members paid with their lives, and over 10 times that were severely wounded, like me. So it was a bad situation.
Were you scared on a daily basis before then, or was it something that you adjusted to?
You adjusted to it. I don't know that I could ever say the word scared. Now, I'm not saying I cannot be scared. You're concerned. You're just like, but I think at the end of the day, for me, it was just like, you know what? This is just what it is. I can't let it paralyze me. We got to stay focused on our mission. I think you just accepted it. For me, it was just like, hey, this is what it is. We got to,
Well, after you said you got hit with an IUD before, right?
Well, so the first time it didn't injure me. So I wasn't injured, or it blew a hole in my oil pan and blew out my tire. I had to be towed back because my vehicle wasn't functioning, but it didn't do any, it didn't hurt anyone or hurt anybody else.
And that didn't put more of a fear in you?
No.
Interesting.
Actually, I was hoping, well, I'm like, oh, it happened. So
you've had your turn, right?
Maybe I had, but I had, my boss had been involved in 5 of them. So
that's insane.
It was bad.
Do you remember very much from that night? Do you remember any of that? You said you died 6 times. Is that right?
Yep.
Do you remember any of that night after they put the tourniquets on? Do you remember anything?
Yeah. So after they got me, First Sergeant Johnson, who found me, he resuscitated me. And so I don't remember Eric Brown putting the tourniquets on my legs, but I remember being conscious, and they were and I remember they were trying to pick me up and put me in the vehicle, and I was so wet with blood they couldn't get a good grip, couldn't get a good handle on me. So they had to pull some of my gear off, and then they got me in a vehicle. And that is when they put me in a vehicle, I basically kind of remember, now my legs were still attached, but they're just mangled. But I basically remember almost my right foot almost being in my lap.
Ugh.
And I saw that, and that's when I started getting, I'm like, what's wrong with my legs? I can't feel my legs. And I started going into shock, or I was already in shock, but I started panicking. And they did their best. They're like, oh, your legs are fine. Your legs are fine. And they were getting me calm. And so they get me in a vehicle, and we're going back to the forward operating base that I left. So I hadn't, I left the memorial service. I mean, I was maybe a mile or so outside of it when I got hit. So we were able to go back to that base. And so they get me into the troop medical clinic, where they're going to start to triage me. And I remember seeing one of my fellow battalion commanders and his sergeant major, Lieutenant Colonel Rob Weaver at the time, and his command sergeant major Eddie Fields. And I remember as they were bringing me in, I remember the look on their face. And that look told me everything. So I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't really know how bad it is then, but after seeing them, I knew I was in trouble. And eventually the brigade surgeon is like on top of me because he's trying to put pressure on my body to help control my bleeding. And I was talking to my boss, Colonel Gibbs, and I remember talking to him, you know, really just making him promise to tell Kim and my kids that I love them, because I wasn't sure. I mean, I wasn't giving up or wasn't quitting, but I wasn't sure I was going to live. I knew that I might die, and I just, with my dying breaths, I wanted, you know, wanted to know that I was thinking about my family, and that was all. I remember hearing the helicopter, the medevac coming in to pick me up, and that was my last thing that I remember in Iraq. I mean, like, the next thing is that I'm waking up in Walter Reed. So this is like about a 7-day, there's like a 7-day, 6 or 7 day period that I have no recollection. I've been able to talk to some folks that touched me along the way. And for instance, well, they told me that I was, when they put me on the helicopter, I was breathing on my own, and it was only like a 6 or 7 minute ride to the green zone. But I went into arrest. They had to intubate me in that short ride. So, and it was just back and forth. You know, when you get that kind of blood, when you get that kind of blood volume, it's not, I mean, your body cannot take all of that blood because it starts to impact your organs. And so I was starting to get to organ failure because of the amount of blood that they were giving me.